So now this is how the distribution of numbers are. Of course, UNISA as a correspondence university has a third of that at 337,000. And then Northwest 64,000, and we go up to Solplaji, which has only 328,000. And then of growth in student numbers, we see across that 10-year period, Northwest grew by 65%. On average, the institutions have grown by 32%. All institutions. And those that are below that is Stellenbosch, Cape Town, and so on, below the 32%, but very close to the 32%. And then, of course, Val, which is growing only at 2.9. Northwest has grown quite dramatically, and Zululand and Forte. Now we look at what has been received and what has been paid. The grants, tuition is 34%, grants from government 42%, and other receipts is 23%, coming up to 63 billion. What has been spent, it's other payments. Here, 54 billion. Compensation to employees, 58%. Of course, universities are labor intensive because you have to have lecturers that teach and goods on services at 35%. So there's those payments, 54 billion. If we look at these composition of these receipts, is grants across time and tuition, and of course other receipts. So grants, which largely come from government, have grown by about 7 billion, from 19 to 26 billion over a period of 5 years. Tuition from almost doubled, that the amount of money paid by students has grown by about 9 billion, from 12 to 21 billion, while other receipts have really stayed almost the same, increasing only by 1 billion over time. Now, tuition fees that are received by a high school, your institution of higher learning, UNISA leads the chart. It has 338. It has a third of the student body. Yeah, it has 3 billion, and then Pretoria University 2 billion, VETS 1.7, and then of course Solplaji 15 million rands. Now, what is the tuition as a percentage of higher learning on average? Tuition as that is school fees as a percentage, we have already seen that, it's at 34%. And at UNISA, it's much higher than 34%, above the average, almost 50%. Rhodes, 43%. Sfago Makhato, 25%. University of Pretoria, amongst the older universities, has 32%. Stellenbosch and Western Cape, 28%. So tuition, that is school fees, particularly in an older university like Stellenbosch, is not a big component of the resources that the university gets. Grants received, here we see VETS being highest on the grants, and it's highest on the grants because it had to carry on the burden, or rather the responsibility for the institution in Mpumalanga. And then, of course, Pretoria University, and these are the grants received, with Mangosuthu receiving the lowest at 284 million. What are the main contributors to grants received by higher education? We see VETS, and we can see the increase from 1.6 to 2.2. There is a consequence of VETS having responsibility over the university in Mpumalanga. And these are the rates, or rather the amounts of grants that were received in billions. Now, the relative contribution of these grants from national government to universities, as far as universities of technology, these have remained flat, and they have increased relatively to universities from 8 to 22 billion, giving it a difference of about 14 billion in between 2006 and then donations have been 4 billion, and Stellenbosch actually leading the pack with almost a quarter of that 4 billion, followed by KwaZulu-Natal, and then the others getting a share 449 for University of Cape Town, Nelson Mandela 374. And then donations as well have moved in the direction of universities and universities of technology getting a smaller fraction of these donations. What about payments? Compensation to employees, we said, is 58%, and 31 billion goes to employees, 3.9 going at UNISA, 2.6 Pretoria, Cape Town 2.8, 2.4, and Sol Plaatje at 38 million, and the others falling in between. Bursaries, which come in at 3.1 billion. We've got grants, got 22 billion, bursaries at 3 billion that universities give to students, and these are distributed in $500 million in West University of Cape Town, 403 Stellenbosch, KwaZulu-Natal 315, and Fort Hare at 5 million in terms of bursaries granted to students. Capital expenditure, universities have to reconstruct and build, and we can see that capital expenditure coming in at University of Witwatersrand as a consequence of providing construction in Mpumalanga. Stellenbosch, 714, there is Sol Plaatje, 644, and Zululand, 32 million. All in all, capital expenditure spent in this higher institution coming at 7.2 billion. Here we are looking at a statement of sources and uses of cash. What has been received, minus payments, the net cash flow from investments in non-financial assets, surplus, there you see why we put A there and why we put B there, and then we come in and create a new variable called C, which is A plus B, which is surplus before net financing of activities. So is that amount, it's A there, it's B, and then we've got a new variable C, and now we look at the net cash flow from financing, which brings a new variable called D, and then of course we look at the changes in the stocks by adding C plus D. So we have here superscript 1 and superscript 2, which is one is an inflow because it's receiving, and then the other one is outflow because it's outgoing. So given this situation, what we see here is what the surplus before net financing of activities, which we talked about there, C, we can see that Pretoria University has quite a positive balance, so is VETS, and the other universities have a bit of a negative balance, which and the net surplus is 2 billion. Looking at what the net change in the stocks of cash, here we see Pretoria University still standing a little bit strong, followed by Cape Town, and then the other universities having a negative net change in the stocks. Don't worry, my colleagues on the sides here will explain those things that I've just spoken to. Now, we know that the president said that in 2016 there was not going to be any increase in fees. Therefore, higher education increase in terms of inflation will be zero. We can see that this is headline inflation, and therefore, as we measure it, that will be zero. We can see that across time, the higher education was above inflation. Its increases were above inflation. That's tertiary education. Inflation was at about 6%. Picking up a little bit there, and of course here tertiary education 3 percentage points above inflation, and 9.8% tertiary education, but by year 2016 it will be zero. But of course we know next year increases have been set not to exceed 8%. What is the annual percentage change in household expenditure on education? these are the kinds of spent by household in all education, not only higher education. But we can see that that has been coming down relative to other expenditures from 12 to about 9.4 by 2015. Now, in terms of where the spend is, 92% is in schools, and that has been consistent. Universities, that has increased a bit, up to 5%. Colleges, 1%, and other institutions, 1%. That making the average overall amount of schools taking 93%, universities and University of Technology about 5% of the total budget of the country, and then colleges 1% and others 1%. What are the closing remarks then? Our closing remarks are that school enrollment in higher education grew by 32% from 2006 to 2015. So that's the enrollment. It grew from 700,000 to almost 1 million by 2015. First-year students are the input into the system, and there are about 170,000 of them as of 2015. Before 2015, there were fewer, but assuming that there are 170, or rather not assuming that 171 going forward will be the number, one would have expected if the throughput is successful, you would expect no more than 600,000 students, including those with doctorate, the pursued doctorate and so on, if people don't fail or repeat and those kinds of things. We have 1 million. So we have about 400,000 more students in the system that are, I wouldn't like to say clogging the system, but the system would have about 600,000 students at most, but it has 1 million, given the input into the system. Well, grants by national government increased by 144% over this 10-year period, when student roll increased by 32.8%. So there must have been a lot of backlog being tackled in the process. Salaries, universities are labor intensive, or the labor of the mind, which is the brain, 58%, and of the total current expenditure over the last 10 years. It's been consistent. On average, income from tuition fees increased by 12% per annum, well above inflation from 2006 to 2015. So it's 6%, 6 percentage points above inflation. That is tuition. And annual rise in tuition for tertiary education was 9.8%. And of course, as I said, in 2016, there's no expectation of an increase in salary. It was frozen. But it will be set at no more than 8% next year. And of course, students went on rampage. They said no free education now. And of course, our report provides only cash transactions. And of course, taken out of annual statements from institutions of higher learning. These are our closing remarks. I brought these two gentlemen from Gauteng. They must answer questions. I made my presentation. They can't come all the way and not answer questions. That's my say. Thanks.
Thanks, SG. As you all know, we are talking to the converted, meaning when you ask a question, your name, your media house. And the other thing is we are connected to Pretoria. I nearly said Cape Town. We are connected to Pretoria. Colleagues in Pretoria, are you ready?